self-evident
that all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office, experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
For insights into the issues,
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all, in-depth discussions.
breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths.
We hold these truths.
with Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Welcome back, everybody. We got a pretty special show today. We have Mark Cuban with us. Mark, thanks so much for being on the show.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks, Dan.
So in our short amount of time, I want to get into your background first. I think most people know what your background is and what you're all about, but walk us through how you ended up being the shark on Shark Tank, owning the Dallas Mavericks, all of it. How long have you been a businessman?
Oh, my goodness. I've been a business person. I've been a hustler since I was 10 years old. I mean, my first little job was selling garbage bags door to door so I could get basketball shoes. I opened up a bar when I was a senior at Indiana University. Came down to Dallas, got a job as a bartender at night, and then worked at a software store during the day. And then I got fired. That led to me starting my own little business called Micro Solutions, which connected PCs. And we were one of the first companies in the country to do local area networks and different types of connectivity. Did that, went 7 years without a vacation, sold that to H&R Block when I was about 30. Took a couple years off, traded stocks, had fun. Then in 95, I hooked up with one of my Indiana University friends and started a company called AudioNet, which turned into broadcast.com, which was the very first streaming company in the country. So we effectively started the whole streaming business, grew that, took it public, and then sold it in 20 years ago today. And then after we sold it, I bought the Mavs in January of 2000, and that kind of built my profile. And then in 2011, the Mark Burnett, the producer of Shark Tank, came to me and said, "You know what? The show's been on the air. We want to spice it up some. Why don't you come on as a guest shark?" I came on for 3 episodes, and then they asked me back to be a full-time shark, and that was 10 years ago. And so Shark Tank, which is Friday nights on ABC, I got to get my plug in, has been going strong ever since. And along the way, probably starting 20 years ago, I started doing a lot of investing in small and medium-sized companies just because I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, started and built businesses and wanted to help other small entrepreneurs grow and build their businesses. And Shark Tank was the perfect venue for it. And so now I'm an investor in more than 150 different companies.
And Shark Tank is such a fun show to watch. So you know what I was thinking when you said that broadcast.com was the first streaming service, I was thinking, so you're responsible for Tiger King. I mean, this is
I'm not going to go that far, but I haven't watched it yet. I feel guilty that I haven't watched it. It's like when I work out tonight, I'll be on the elliptical.
Yeah.
And that'll be my thing. I'm going to turn on Tiger King.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird. It's weirder than you think it's going to be. That's
that's exactly why everybody loves it, right?
Right. I won't get into it. This show isn't about Tiger King. You know what? When I look at Shark Tank, it's entertaining because you get to see these really cool ideas, these American entrepreneurs trying to make it. And then they see you guys with all this experience sort of pick them apart. And so you learn from both ends. You're like, wow, this is what it takes for just a small business to start up, and you see what that looks like. But then you see the more, I don't know what I would call it, I guess the more sophisticated conversation from the sharks and how that plays out. What are some of your favorite businesses that have ever come across your radar?
Oh my
on that
goodness.
show?
You know, let me give you some of the inside Shark Tank stuff. So when we go to shoot, we shoot 2.5 weeks in June and 2.5 weeks in September, at least back in the old world anyways. We'll see what happens coming up. And then we go in there, start shooting about 8:30, give or take. And we just watch pitches all day long. So we'll see 10 to 12 pitches a day. And in real life, those pitches can go an hour and a half if they're an intense or complicated business or a bunch of sharks are interested. And so we go through so many deals, over 250 deals in any given season. Then they take the ones they want for TV and edit them down. So what would have taken 60 or 90 minutes in real time is 10 minutes on your TV.
I see.
And yeah, so it's cool, but what's really cool about it, we get to see a lot of great entrepreneurs. And, I don't really have a favorite per se. It's kind of like your children. I've invested in so many, but I've had some really good successes. I had one company that sold for $80 million. It was a company called Cycloramic that did something called computer vision. I'm proud of so many of my companies. There's a company called Nobo, Nohbo, which a kid named Ben Stern, who was 16, came on, and now he's built a business that's going really well with sustainable, environmentally friendly shampoo drops, of all things. Lainey Lazari, who started a company when she was 11, came on Shark Tank when she was 19 from my hometown of Pittsburgh. She started this thing called simplesugars.com, where it's like a scrub that you put on your hands and your face to do whatever you do with the scrub. I'm not their biggest customer. But she's built a company now where she's done millions of dollars. And, one of my fondest moments was when, after she aired, I think she was 6 years ago, about 6 months after she aired, Dan, she calls me up. She goes, "Mark, I don't know what to do." And I'm thinking, we got a problem here. She goes, "I've got $1 million in the bank. What do I do?" So this was, at that time, a 21-year-old girl that just sold so much product, and her business was going so well. And I'm like, put aside for your taxes, pay off your bills, and, let's just save it for a rainy day and maybe invest some. And, just those types of stories just send such a great message to everybody who's watching, that the American dream is alive and well. And that's exactly why I do the show. I mean, every day a parent comes up to me, or, used to come up to me and say, we watch it as a family together. Every Friday night, we're turning on the show, and it's the one show we can watch as a family that everybody feels good about. And that's why I do it. We need to create new generations of entrepreneurs. That's what makes this country great. And then coming out of the other side of this pandemic, it's going to be so critically important. We're going to look back, Dan, and in 5 or 10 years, there's going to be 20 companies that are created out of this that we just say, wow, why didn't I think of that? These are incredible. And hopefully one of them started because they watched Shark Tank, and that's why I do the show. Yeah,
I think that's true. And it's been amazing to watch American industry shift rapidly in the cause of this pandemic. I toured a place yesterday that shifted their liquor production into hand sanitizing liquids. There's a lot of stories like that, whether it's from making masks or whatever it is that's happening all over the country. And
one of my companies, one of my investments, BSB Brown Sugar Bourbon, worked with their distillery, and that's exactly what they did. And now they're shipping 400,000 bottles of hand sanitizer a month. It's crazy, but that's what being a good citizen, that's what being a good corporate citizen is all about.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And what do you say to people who, there is sort of this populist movement in this country where the richer you are, I guess the more morally corrupt you are, that it's only these small mom and pop shops that are apparently on good moral standing. But what do you say to that? How would you explain that, the way the system functions to people, and how investing works, and where it comes from, and why it's actually good for the economy and good for small business?
Yeah, it's a great question. I get it all the time. And, I tell my friends when, they hear people saying, well, because you're a billionaire, you're bad or this or that. I'm like, one, what a good problem to have. I'll take that every time. And number two, I'm like, look, not everybody comes to the game equally. Not everybody has equal opportunities. And I respect that and agree with that, actually. But everybody can control their own effort. And everybody has a chance to go out there and start a business. It doesn't have to be big. It could be any size. But in this country, the American dream, the American opportunity is still there. And now, when we come out of the other side of this, and we definitely will, there's going to be so many unique opportunities that it doesn't matter what community you come from. It doesn't matter who you are. There's going to be a way to come up with an idea for a business that you can excel at. And you just have to go out there and find it. And so, I've said this before, there's good and bad to capitalists, and then there's good and bad capitalists, and people who are, like we were just talking, this is an opportunity for capitalists to show that they can be compassionate and really help the country. And I think we're starting to see a lot of that. But it's also, when we come out of this, capitalism is what's going to get us through this. What makes our country different than any country in the world, Dan, and you know this, as well, if not better than anybody, is that we're a country full of entrepreneurs, that we are creative, that we are innovative, that we want to make new things and create new businesses. That's what makes the United States of America different. That's what capitalism is all about. Do we need to adjust some things? Yeah. I'm a big believer that every company, no matter how big or small, should give stock or options and warrants to every single one of their employees. And that's exactly what I've done with every one of my businesses. Any one of my companies that I've sold, that I've started and sold, every employee has made money. And so I think we can make some adjustments, but the only way that we're going to shine as the United States of America is because of capitalism and the fact that we'll start new businesses that will help us solve the new problems that we're encountering.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because I knew you had that. You had said that before, that every company should give stock options or equity to every employee, and it sounds like you yourself do that. So
Yep.
How would we? Is that something you just encourage business to do, or is that something you say that government should enforce?
I think you should reward it. The government should reward it, whether it's a tax deduction. There's a lot of things that we reward by either not counting them against your taxable income, or not expensing them, or expensing them to reduce your income. And I think we really should reward companies, whether we make them deductible, whether we make it so that you have to treat employees somewhat equally, not all equally, in terms of how you reward them. But I'm hesitant to say you have to legislate that you have to give stock. I mean, that's a bridge too far for me right now, but I think we certainly should encourage it through tax code where we can.
Yeah. And what do you think about the bill that was passed recently, specifically with respect to the distressed industry program, which is basically a loan program, as well as the small business program, the payroll protection plan?
Right. So let's start with the payroll protection. I think it's brilliant, but it's like any other legislation. It's still got some hickeys to it, some things that need to be cleaned up. Number one, it was passed last week, and you won't be able to apply it till the earliest on Friday. And I've been trying to encourage banks of all sizes to accelerate that, but they haven't really been willing to. So there's, in this environment, 1 week is everything. Right.
Yeah.
So my challenge with the PPP, the payroll protection program, is that the execution of it after the passage hasn't been great. And I know they're trying, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but it's got to be quicker, just like the $1,200. It's, 2 or 3 weeks is the difference between paying your bills or not. And like everything else, it's, the planning is the easy part. The execution is the hard part.
Well, especially for government. I mean,
exactly right.
You're used to the free market, to the private sector. It's quite different. I've spent my entire life working for government, whether in the military or Congress, and people ask me funny questions sometimes. They're like, isn't it frustrating to be in Congress because you're so used to getting things done like really quickly, like in the military? And I'm like, what? Nothing happens fast in the military either. I mean, it can if it's life or death. We can make things happen fast, but for the most part, if it's not life or death, it goes just as slow, if not slower.
Congress is about the same way, right? Winston Churchill said, right?
Yeah.
Americans will do the right thing every time when they have no other options,
Yeah, Congress will get there eventually. But Congress is supposed to move slow. I mean, that's what I remind people. You guys aren't getting anything done. And I'm like, first of all, we pass bills all the time, a lot of which are actually bipartisan every single week. Not lately, of course. We're in lockdown. But it's also supposed to move slow. You should be worried when 435 people from vastly different parts of the country with vastly different preferences and problems and solutions somehow agree on something. No,
I agree 100%. I hate to admit this, but the honest answer is more often than not, I usually vote for the person I think will do the least.
Yeah. Well, there's some up there who, whether they're just no voters to everything, and from some kind of purist ideology. I'm thinking, guys like Amash and Tom Massey, and they had,
everybody. Look, on both sides, right? There's guys like that on both sides, but you know what? Hopefully, on the other side of this, we'll be a lot less dogmatic because we've learned a lot of hard lessons. I mean, prior to this, the idea that we would pass a multi-trillion-dollar stimulus program would have just turned my stomach. but we're in unique circumstances, and we have imperfect information. And when you have imperfect information, it's not ready, aim, fire. It's ready, fire, aim. And every decision we make or that our legislators make is going to be wrong at some level. But it would have been worse to do nothing. And the old saying, perfection is the enemy of progress, right? And so that's where we're at. And so hopefully this leads to a lot of people with new perspectives when we get to the other side.
I think so. I mean, there's very few people. I mean, I was thinking of the sort of libertarian branch of the Republican Party that's generally against all government spending, no matter what. But that's very few people. I think there was pretty broad consensus that there was some kind of rescue package that needed to happen. I was pretty disappointed to see how it all fell apart as Senate negotiations were going well. And then all of a sudden, it was a corporate slush fund. All of a sudden, and that was not based. That was not based in any truth whatsoever.
Who knows, right? I mean, you guys have a much better feel for it than I do, obviously, but we're in unique circumstances, and we don't know what's going to happen to the country's finances after a $2 trillion stimulus that'll probably turn into a $6 trillion stimulus. But we're going to learn real fast because we're forbearing so many obligations to the government. We're going to tax revenues at all levels, city, state, county, federal, they're going to drop like a rock. And all those programs are still going to have expectations to be funded and to perform. And so we're going to learn exactly how deficits work, just like we did after World War II. And hopefully we'll have a boom that covers it. And if not, we'll see what we do. But, we're going to have to be a much more agile government and a much more hopefully data-driven government that is not dogmatic. But it's all on the come. We just don't know.
So maybe if small business owners who are struggling and they're listening to this show right now and they're excited about this loan that can potentially get forgiven, it will get forgiven, just so everybody knows, as long as you spend it on payroll and rent and utilities and things like that. So, but they're going to want some advice for, they're going to have to be as efficient as possible.
Thing number one is call up your bank right now. Whenever you're listening to this, while you're listening, call up your banker and say, how do I apply for the payroll protection program? I need to do that now because, when you do the math, honestly, there's more small businesses that'll need more money that is than has been allocated to the program. And now I have no doubt that more will be allocated because it'll be necessity, but you want to be first. You don't want to wait for that second tranche. And so do it now. And it's really easy. And unlike previous small business administration loans, what's different about here is that the banker gets to make the decision. You just have to fill out a 4-page certification form. It's on SBA.gov right now. It's still a little bit, it's not finalized. There's still some funky things with 20% or more ownership responsibilities that hopefully they'll change. But get it filled out now, get it to your banker. And so come Friday, hopefully they can fund you right away because it doesn't have to go through the SBA. It's all decided by your banker.
Yeah, that's a good part. What about changes to their business? What advice would you have to get through this and make sure they come out of it on the other side?
So number one is you have to sit and talk to your employees, whether it's one person, whether it's 50 people, whether you have a ton of part-time people, or let's just say you're a restaurant and you have 100 part-time people and you pretty much laid them off or fired them because you have no one coming in the door other than some pickup and delivery. You've got to talk to them individually, no matter how long it takes. And one, explain to them and be completely transparent because everybody's scared, right? Every single person that works for you knows the circumstances, knows you're closed, and they want to know, can you deal with this financially and how you're going to get to the other side? And number two, ask them for ideas. You'll be shocked that when you talk to your employees, because they're in the front lines, they may have suggestions. They probably know your customers better than you do. And because they know your customers better than you do, because they deal with them all the time, they may come up with something that you say, wow, that's a great idea. Or they may say, you know what, we'll take, because of this new payroll protection plan, just furlough us so we continue to get our benefits. And when you get the money, bring us back because we know it's going to get, the loan is going to be forgiven. those are the types of things that you have to start to do. Step one. Step two is do the same thing with your customers. Call them, talk to them, ask them how they're doing. Ask them if they have any suggestions or ideas, because again, they're just as scared as you are. They're wondering about their company and their jobs. Worst case, you get closer, and if when you come back, they appreciate that you took the time to call. Best case, they come up with ideas how you can continue to do business. And third thing I would say is every small business, and then you've been through this and you see this with your constituents all the time. They say it all the time, I wish I had time to do A, B, or C, because no business is perfect. You know, you always want to say, well, if I only had the time, I would redo this process. I would rethink how I'm doing this. Now's a chance you have to rethink everything.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you redo all your promotional materials. You know, the service industry has been killed. Maybe, you know, there's a videographer or creative people that are looking to do anything, and they'll cut you a special deal to redo your website content or your marketing videos or whatever it may be that you use to promote. You know, you get a chance to talk to those vendors and talk to those customers and, you know, connect to them a lot more closely. And that's a beautiful thing.
So what do you say to there was a lot of criticism again against the other part of the rescue package, which was the distressed industry loans. Again,
Sure.
it was called a corporate slush fund. You know, what I pointed out there was that an American who loses their job to a big business is no different than an American that loses their job to a small business. Okay. And we pause the economy. So we do have to inject capital into these businesses, no matter what the size.
Yep. I agree with that 100%. Now, the question becomes, who's doing the negotiations and what are you negotiating, right? So if it's Mark Cuban and Dan Crenshaw representing the American people on the other side of the table for Boeing, you know, I'm acting like the shark, right? This is the Shark Tank, Mark Cuban, and I'm asking for equity. I'm asking for everything I can get because I'm representing the American people.
Mm-hmm.
And if Boeing has other options, and honestly, you know, there's still money out there willing to do investments, particularly ones that are great deals. You know, and so if Boeing came to me just as Mark Cuban and said, we need money, or if they went to Warren Buffett and said, we need money, I guarantee, look at the deal that Warren Buffett did with Bank of America in 2010, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
He gave them $5 billion and also asked for warrants, which gives you the right to buy stock at a certain price in the future.
Yeah.
And he made $12 billion off of that by loaning them the $5 billion to help them. And the whoever's representing the American people in these negotiations should do the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, get me, you, or Warren Buffett. Now, that said, is it a slush fund? No, it wasn't their fault that that the virus hit, but it also wasn't their employees' fault either. So if I'm sitting at that negotiating table as a shark, I'm saying to the CEO of Boeing or whoever, I'm not trying to pick on Boeing, that if you want taxpayer money, not only do you need to cut this deal where you give the taxpayer equity, but I want you to treat each and every one of your employees the same way you're treating the CEO.
Yeah.
So if you reprice the options for the CEO or give them a stock grant, and he makes $1 million a year, and you give him $1 million worth of options and grants or whatever, and then you need to give the janitor that makes $26,000 a year the same package, because it wasn't their fault the virus hit either. But they're going to, you know, it's different going forward because the CEO doesn't have any special magic that the janitor doesn't either. They all are going to have to bust their ass to get that company through all this and get them to the other side. And so you want to reward them. And so that's how I would negotiate for the taxpayer.
I think what was frustrating about that entire blow up when Nancy Pelosi flew in and quite literally blew up that negotiation. Yep. Those protections were in there. The salaries for executives were capped already. No stock buybacks was already in that bill, as well as keeping people on the payroll. Because again, the entire point of this whole rescue package is to keep people attached to their employers, so that we don't have to keep sending out this direct cash payments, which basically makes people de facto government employees, which is the last thing we want.
Right.
I want to ask you about a kind of a broader economic question, because
Sure.
I know you've got to go soon, and we have limited time left. There's sort of an interesting debate, mostly amongst conservatives, on sort of I think a Trumpian style of economics, where he wants to bring back manufacturing to the United States, right? He's skeptical of free trade. He wants more fair trade. And it's what he's describing. If you were to ask an economist like, he's not really an economist, but somebody like Oren Cass, who I've had on this show, who talks about industrial policy, basically talking about reasonable ways within conservative principles to favor industry that we believe we need here. I just wrote an op-ed yesterday in the Washington Examiner talking about energy independence and how we're on the brink of losing that. Yep. And losing that market share to Saudi and Russia. Now, a free market libertarian would say, well, if we can buy $3 a barrel oil from Saudi Arabia, why shouldn't we do that? It's cheaper, it's better, it's more efficient. But that's an honest debate there. So, I mean, where do you fall on that? How can we bring manufacturing back? I'm sure we can't just snap our fingers, but there's got to be some ways we can do that.
Absolutely. And so I agree. We're seeing it now with PP&E for healthcare providers. Some are dying, and definitely more are getting sick, and people are dying because we don't manufacture enough here. And so the question is, do you try to do manufacturing 1.0 or manufacturing 2.0? Manufacturing 1.0 is that you just try to bring it here and you recreate the assembly lines of old, because that's what creates the most work for the most number of bodies in the short term. Manufacturing 2.0, in my mind, is as part of a new infrastructure bill. You say we need to lead the way in robotics, so that the best way for us to bring, whether you're making T-shirts or masks or gowns or gloves or any of the things that are typically made in Asia or East Asia, we need to become the global leader in robotics so that we can bring back everything, not some things, but everything, because at some point robotics will be able to manufacture pretty much any product, because the robotics will get manual dexterity at some point over the next 10 years. So when you look forward, if we can become the experts, and right now we're behind China, Japan, and Germany in robotics, we will be able to recreate all that manufacturing, if not 100%, most of it here in the United States. Now, some people would argue that you're not going to put as many people to work if you don't do it the old industrial way. And what I would say is, to do it the old industrial way, there's only so many things that you can bring over and recreate without a lot of government subsidies. And that creates, disincentives and misincentives. But by doing it via robotics as part of a new infrastructure bill, now all of a sudden we can go after everything, because we'll be able to bring over so many different types of products that the aggregate employment would be higher than it would be if we tried to do it the old industrial way. Does that make sense?
I think so. Are you saying that we don't have the skill sets to build the manufacturing robotics that we need here, or we don't have the education? I would assume that a lot of people can get educated pretty well in robotics at MIT.
Yeah, no question. We can get educated, but we don't have it's not our companies that are leading the way.
I see.
German companies and Japanese companies in particular have been buying up and really focusing on that as a country, and their companies have really, they've kicked our butts when it comes to software for robotics, and that is something we need to cure. We really haven't invested a lot as a country to be the leader, and if we were to become the leader there, whether it's through acquisitions or, like you said, through the brainiacs at MIT and Harvard or wherever, Indiana University and University of Texas, wherever, right? Then we could really change the game. But we haven't made it a focus. And so when it comes to more directly answer your question, I think it would be a mistake just to say, you know what, let's just subsidize or help manufacturers create assembly lines with lots of workers, hoping that allows us to compete. Mm-hmm. I would say, let's one up everybody. Let's look at this as America 2.0, and what's it going to look like in 10 and 20 years.
So what you're saying... Yeah, and so I think what you're saying is you've got to invest in that next horizon, and invest in the R&D, invest in the education for that next big thing that we see, whether it's robotics or microchips or whatever it is. Yeah,
all the above, because that's the only way we're going to lead. And because remember, if Japan and China do it and beat us to the punch like they have so far, that's why their costs are so low. They're replacing assembly line workers by the minute. They have factories there that have hundreds, if not thousands, of robots that are building things. Yeah. And it'll be so much more difficult for us. And so infrastructure 2.0, America 2.0, manufacturing 2.0, that's got to be our focus. Otherwise, we'll wake up in 10 years and say, oh my goodness, we're so far behind. What do we do now?
Are we not currently capable of simply buying the robotics that they produce?
Oh yeah, we can, but they're in limited supply, and the software, they're moving ahead of us. So every time we take a step forward, they can take 2 steps forward because it's their software.
I see. And and it's proprietary, and they're not really giving it away.
Yeah, they're not going to give it away, and they'll share it, but we're always waiting on them and dependent on them. And it's the dependency we're trying to solve, right, and get away from.
Right. So you're not a fan of subsidizing certain industries that we want or picking those winners and losers, but you are a fan of investing in the R&D necessary to actually be at that competitive edge.
You know what I'm a fan of? I'm a fan of using technology so America can kick every other country's butt in business. That's what I'm a fan of. I'm a fan of America Inc. I'm a fan of American exceptionalism. I know we have the brain power, the ability, the entrepreneurial spirit to kick anybody's ass in anybody's business and environment. But we have to think forward, and we have to be creative as a country as well, and not try to recreate not try to recreate what's been done in the past, but try to invent the future so that we can control it.
I like that. That fires me up.
Yeah. Hey, before we get off, Dan, thank you for your service, man. You're a hero, and thank you for everything you've done for this country.
I appreciate that. No, thank you. Thank you. I mean, again, our entrepreneurs are the backbone of our country, and guys like me, we just go out there and make sure the rest of the world knows about it.
And I'm good with that, man. I'm definitely good with that.
All right. Hey, well, thank you so much for being on the show, Mark. We could talk for hours. Maybe we'll have you on again.